Welcome, everybody. It is episode number 64. Number 64 coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And man, do we have an epic guest tonight. Steve Spingola, retired from the Milwaukee Police Department, most known for being involved in the Jeffrey Dahmer case and Cold Justice on the Oxygen Channel. And I came to meet him in San Antonio at the Homicide Investigators of Texas conference last year. And Steve is a really, really cool guy, entertaining. And Kathleen, I'm excited too. This is kind of one of those homicide detectives that in my world, he's one of those that's one of the more well-known homicide detectives like Gil Carrillo. And then we have Steve Spingola. Those are the kinds of guys that I look up to as a homicide detective. So I'm really, really honored to be here with this guy tonight. I wanted to mention something. What a huge news day in the state of Tennessee, where the Attorney General for the Tennessee or for the state of Tennessee, along with the TBI, also known as Texas or Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, they made a huge announcement today in reference to the Pauline Pusser murder investigation from 1967. That is going to be the wife of Sheriff Buford Pusser from the movie Walking Tall, that series of Walking Tall movies. Buford Pusser was the sheriff of McNairy County for, I think, 6 or 7 years, something like that. And if you remember, we've had episode number 35 and 37 on this show. I believe that's the episode numbers, where we had Mike Elam come on and Danny Couples along as well. He came on one of those episodes, and we talked about that investigation. And huge announcement, and that is that if Buford Pusser was alive today, that they would have tried to secure an indictment for murder on him. So crazy deal. I'm going to have to applaud TBI and the Attorney General for really re-examining that case with today's technology and what they said. And I encourage everybody to go and look it up online after this show, of course, and really watch the press conference interview. I think it's really, really interesting. And I got to give a huge props to Mike Elam too, because in large part, I think that's the reason that case actually was getting reinvestigated, was because he was shining a light on that case. And they didn't come out and say it today, but I have a feeling that he got, Mike Elam actually got contacted in reference to somebody that thought that they had one of the guns used in that, which was a carbine. And anyway, it's great news for getting to the truth. And as Mike would say, the truth has no agenda. So I love that. And I'm sure that there's going to be more coming from that down the line. Let's talk about, I don't want to keep this guy. He's a hero. Believe me, he's like a superstar. He's very modest. So he's going to come on here and he's going to say, no, I'm nobody different than any other homicide guy. But I'm just going to mention when I asked him, I said, hey, Steve, send me a short bio. And he did that. It was pretty short. And I know that he's not talking about a lot of the stuff that he's done, but here it is. He was employed by the Milwaukee Police Department from 1977 to 2009. He started as a police aide, also known as an explorer, in high school in 1977. I'm a huge advocate of that program. I also was an explorer for the fire department, though. But the Explorer program, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you have kids that are interested in this, you should look into that. It's great. He was a police officer, a detective, a lieutenant of detectives, and he's now retired from the Milwaukee Police Department. And his last assignment was the supervisor of the homicide squad at Milwaukee Police Department. And I have no doubt that they had their hands full in that city with lots of murders. Currently, he teaches at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and Gateway Technical College, which is a law enforcement academy. And he's worked on Cold Justice since 2014. And let me welcome Steve Spingola. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, Jason. I don't know if I can live up to this introduction. I'll tell you that much, but thanks a lot.
No, man, you're great. I love it. So I met you down in San Antonio. I got to hear you speak about the Dahmer case, which was I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was just a fascinating case. We'll get to that here shortly, but I'm curious as to how you ended up even getting involved. I mean, I know you became an explorer, but you must have had interest in doing this before that. Tell me about what led you down this road.
That's a good question. I'll tell you the real true story. I was in math class in high school, and it was out on the second floor, and I looked out the window, and there was a church right across the street, and a Milwaukee police officer had been murdered. He was shot during a family trouble by a guy with a rifle. And I tell you, I never saw so much camaraderie and brotherhood as I did when they buried a cop. It was almost, very, very emotional for me to watch that. And the cops, how they took care of each other, and the community kind of came together and talked about it. And, that was, I kind of liked Law and Order. I took, classes in school, and I wanted to go through criminal justice in college. And amazing thing was, I have no family that was in law enforcement before that or anybody after. And we talked a little bit about it. I don't know if I'd want my own children right now to go into law enforcement. It's just changed so drastically. But for me, it was a great job. I hope it was for you. It still has great interest to a lot of people. And I'll be like in a grocery store or something, and somebody will stop me knowing I work on cold justice, and they've had a relative or something that was killed in a robbery in like 1974 or something and was never solved, and they want us to take a look at it. So just like the Pusser case, I think any homicide that isn't cleared, there's always somebody's out there, a family. Even, now I get groups from where I teach anthropology classes and stuff that go out and do digs for bodies and all kinds of questions. So there's so many people interested in the world of true crime right now. And that's why I think you've got this podcast, and it's such a great success.
Well, I appreciate it. And it's a success because of people like you that are willing to come on. Because, you know what I mean? I've had some epic people, and you're definitely top tier, and that are willing to come on and share your time with myself and the listeners, and we appreciate that really. Just amazing. So you get up, you get into. How did you even hear about the Explorers? I mean, was that something that
there was a couple other people at the high school I was at that were interested in it. A lot of people wanted to get into law enforcement, but then I think it's similar to now, and I'm sure your department's having the same problems when I go across the country. People think it's that you watch Law and Order and it's going to be like that. You know what I'm saying? It's not. You're working holidays, weekends, third shifts. You're in court. You get all these cases that are frustrating. A lot of rules to obey when you're a young person. You know what I'm saying? We've had people fired for getting arrested for drunken driving and things like that. So it is what it is. It's I think that people that make the commitment, and for you, I'm sure everything from your family to I don't know, your own personal life, it's been drastically affected by law enforcement one way or another. Some good, some bad.
Yeah, for sure on that, no doubt. I'm sure you'll agree with me that if they took a picture of you when you started in homicide, and then they took another picture of you about 5 years down the line,
it does change you. And one thing I still notice is like my trust of people is long gone. You know what I'm saying? I talk to some of the best liars in the country, and it's like, how could I have believed this? You know what I'm saying? Once you leave, and it's like, I don't believe it. But man, what a group of characters, and what a group of way people have tried, to cover up crimes. I mean, burning crime scenes. And I had a guy who strangled his wife. He took a bite out of an apple, and then he put it into her mouth and threw it on the basement steps, and claimed she, was eating an apple and choked. And they were actually able to get the bite marks off the apple and compare it to him. And then he killed himself, and we went to arrest him that day. But Steve,
I got to give him some points for creativity.
I do too. I always graded these guys, an 8 or something like that. I was walking into the building one night. Our parking lot was shut down. I had to walk down the street, and some guy pulls up next to me, and I got a suit on. He said, "Hey, are you a cop?" I said, "Yeah." He said, I just killed my girlfriend. You want to go see? I said, yeah, let's go, So I call a dispatcher and a squad. He puts me in a car. Anyways, he drives me up to the house, and it was November in Wisconsin. That's fairly cold. You're talking, 30s, 40s. So I got into the house, and he had the air conditioner on. And he's telling me what happened. He choked his girlfriend out, and he laid her out in the bedroom. But he put her in a room where he turned all the air conditioners on, right? And then he was driving in to the Milwaukee Police Department to turn himself in because he had a municipal warrant for traffic. Figure he could, stay in jail for 5 days, and then when he went home, they'd find her. But of course, the body would be pretty well preserved, so his alibi was going to be that he was in jail. So he sat down and laid this whole thing out, but he just couldn't go through with it. As he was pulling up to the building, he just saw me and confessed to the whole thing. But
wow.
Every once in a while, they come up with some fairly decent ideas, maybe from Law and Order or watching you. I don't know, but it's amazing sometimes,
Yeah, that would be nice to get one of those. Yeah. So you get, and what was it about the Milwaukee Police Department that really did you grow up in Milwaukee? Is that what kind of
Milwaukee, and it's, we were, and I'm not trying to, disparage it. We were a pretty good city to live in, schools, raise your family and everything like that. I was on the streets in the mid 80s, and that's when crack cocaine hit from Chicago, and Milwaukee grew up overnight. We started having drive-by shootings and triple murders and stuff we never saw before. And it was all a direct result of gangs and stuff out of the city of Chicago. I'm sure you had some of the same problems, with gangbangers out of Texas and other states too. And it really took off. All of a sudden, the Saturday night specials, these 25s that cops were getting shot with, turned into the Glocks and the SIGs and with multiple, round magazines. And it just got worse, potentially. And I think it was just Tuesday of this week, Milwaukee just hit their 100th homicide that they've actually recorded. We used to have 20. If we had 20 a year, that was a lot. And now it's what it is.
That's crazy. That's really crazy.
And what's the same thing.
Yeah. I remember when I was in college, there was a professor that actually had a really interesting class exercise. And that was basically what it was, is he would assign us like a month in the 20s. And he wanted us to go back and research back when you had a library and you could actually get on there and find bibliography. You could find articles and stuff from the 20s on New York Times. And what he wanted us to do is he wanted us to go back and search all the violent crime that was going on back then. And what I learned was the same kind of jazz was happening back in the 20s and every, that it's going on today. It's just that today with all of the media explosion of all these cases and stuff, everybody gets it like right now. But the same kind of craziness of axe murders and you name it was going on back then too. It's just a little bit bizarre but you're right. As far as the crime skyrocketing, same thing in Tulsa back in the day, man, when I became a cop here in Tulsa, there was probably 30 homicides a year, 30 to 35. Now,
they were easily solved. It was a husband-wife deal, or two guys go to a bar and they bump into somebody, and the next thing you know, somebody pulls out a knife or a gun, and everybody knew who the people were. And I think one of the reasons now that you're seeing so many cold cases, I don't know where they get the numbers from, but I read it's gone from about 2,500 a year to 7,000 a year in the United States, and are officially, I think it's a lot more. But, they're just not easily solved anymore. And when you got these gangbangers and stuff out there that aren't going to talk to you, I don't know where we're going to go with these cases. They just go down the street and kill somebody else and write it off. I mean, that's just the way they solve those cases. Yeah.
So you get on the Milwaukee Police Department, and when you get on there, what was kind of your what was your progression on the department as far as specialty?
It was a general patrol thing, and I always liked the investigative side of it. So then they stuck me down in narcotics. They stuck me in sex crimes for a while, which wasn't one of my big things. We would go out and grab prostitutes and stuff like that. But it kind of showed me I went from one area of the city to the whole city, and the different parts. While a lot of crime was the same, there were just different parts, I guess, of the city that were more dangerous, that the drugs were more prolific, prostitution was what it was. And then all of a sudden we started to get taken over certain areas by the gangs, and that really changed. And our police chief at the time, he was a hard guy, Harold Breyer. He was a very tough guy, let me tell you. He'd been in about 4 or 5 shootings himself, and so this guy was tough as nails. And he was a law and order type police chief. It was a simple thing. If you broke a law, you went to jail. That was it. Everybody respected him. The judiciary, the mayors and stuff, they were all afraid of him. But, it's changed drastically since the 80s, I'm sure, in any city. And Milwaukee has basically become crime prone. Carjackings are a norm. And nobody really wants to do anything about it. One of the worst things, and I've been in other cities, but our reckless driving problem is gigantic in this city. And they've tried all kinds of things. We are getting so many people killed in car accidents on an average night. It's almost surpassing the homicide rate in certain areas. So, it's changed. The schools are not very good here. The taxes are high. People have moved out. And I don't know. It's like any other major metropolitan city. It's got significant problems, and I think the people that could afford to move out have, and the people who couldn't are there. And a lot of those people become victims of crimes at some point.
Yeah. What is the population of Milwaukee?
They'll tell you about 700,000. I think it's below that. They've made great additions trying to put in condos in the downtown area, things of that nature. But that's only attracted so many people. And the taxes are astronomical, So we've got a lot of ball players living in the downtown area. The Bucks players, the Brewers players, they used to move more to an area called Mequon, which was north of Milwaukee, a very financially well-off area. Halle Berry was living out there for a while when she was married here. So those were the $2 to $3 million houses. Now you've got these multi-condos in the downtown area, but they've had trouble selling those for a number of years now. So I don't know what's going to attract people moving back into Milwaukee. We just had 10 inches of rain about 2-3 weeks ago, and we had major flooding in Milwaukee, which has always been a problem. It's taken out a number of houses and the insurance costs and stuff. So, the infrastructure is not set up for the number of people in the building that's going on either.
Well, I tell you what, believe it or not, the Milwaukee Homicide Unit, they were wanting to be on the first 48. And I was super excited about it, man. Number one, I always get to the point where I'm thinking, man, people are sick of watching Tulsa on there. It's like we're on there all the time. And it would be great to share with another city, have another city. And so they were really interested in doing it. They were all about it, all in. And then the city council voted against it. They weren't.
That's the thing we get too, like the same thing with cold justice. People always say, well, why don't you come here to Tulsa? Why don't you come here to Sacramento? Everybody's afraid of being sued or seeing something that they don't want shown on television or something like that. So, this idea of transparency is not basically what it is. And it's very difficult, I think, for sometimes, it's easier just to write these cases off, as unsolvable. It's just what a lot of departments do. And you go back, I don't care where you go, there's major cases in even small cities involving missing kids. Those are the really bad ones where you got the missing kids or something like that.
Hey, I got to introduce just to this is grandson number 2.
Save that money.
This is little Ryan, so I thought he just showed up. So if you hear a little something in the background, then that might be what it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go on. He just made his television appearance, his debut. Good job.
Hey.
Anyway, so hey, let's talk a little. So you finally get to the homicide unit in Milwaukee,
right?
And tell me about what that experience was like for you when you joined the unit.
Everybody was, by that point, I had been through other units, sexual assaults, missing kids. Drugs were the big thing. I don't know about Tulsa, but all homicides, all burglaries, all robberies somehow run through drugs. It's, they're drug dealers or they're people buying drugs, even to the point that we arrested members of the judiciary and police officers buying drugs that were involved in crime, street crimes. It was amazing. And I got there and I was working third shift, and our city, probably like most major cities, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. are the major crime problems. The prostitutes are on the street. We get all kinds of bar robberies, gas station robberies. And it really opened my eyes to the violence, the people that are out there on third shift. And, back in the day, if it was your case, if you were assigned, I don't know how Tulsa works it was yours. You know what I'm saying? You had to go to the autopsy. You had to take everything to the DA's office to get the search warrants. And once these cases started multiplying, they decided that we would shift it. Now, Milwaukee's unusual. Every shift, day shift, early shift, or late shift, we had sister cars. So if you were the day shift guy, I had a murder at 3 a.m. I might work it till 10 and then just hand it off to you, and you had to go do the day shift work and you handed it off to somebody after 4 o'clock and then it came back to me. So our clearance rate was really high up compared to most major cities because of that. I think the way that we investigated that. But then as the homicides began to pile up and the gangs showed up, the clearance rate, it kind of took a dip. And there was a lot of criticism from the radio announcers, the news announcers, and citizens that would go, "Why do you want to raise when all of a sudden your homicide clearance rate's gone from 80% to 50%?" So it is a difficult thing to go out there and keep that high rate of clearances up when you look at some of the factors that are involved with some of these homicides.
You're right. I'll tell you something, Steve. Here in Tulsa, we haven't had an open case since the summer of 2023.
That's great.
And it is great. And I'll tell you something. We've had roughly 630 homicides since 2016. And out of those, I think we've got 28 that are open, and we know who did half of those.
Yeah, that's it. And I don't know what's worse for a family. Your loved one is murdered and you don't know who did it, or your loved one is murdered and you know who did it, but the DA won't prosecute. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's just not enough there. And so, that's one thing I sort of learned from working cold justice. And even in the homicide unit, we had DAs, we had like anything. It's like doctors, it's probably like teachers. You've got the best in some fields, and sometimes we get people that are new and they're a little gun shy. And, these circumstantial cases, they don't like them. They don't like the fact that the husband is fooling around and has $1 million insurance policy out on his wife and claims she just left. They want a confession, they want the body, they want something. And as well as I do, in some cases, you're not going to have that. You're just not. And I think when the circumstantial evidence becomes the preponderance of the evidence, that's when the DA should issue. But, they're always telling me, well, what if she shows up on the beaches in Hawaii? Well, how many women are going to leave their kids without a purse, without a car, without their last paycheck, and wind up on the beaches in Hawaii living happily ever after? It doesn't happen,
Especially in today's day and age with an electronic footprint.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere. And I'll tell you something, which was really, and you still have your hands in it because of cold justice, of course. So you're aware of the advances in the world of forensics, and you're also aware of just the technology with flock cameras of today. We're solving cases today, Steve, that 2 years ago, these cases would have been cold for sure.
I agree with you.
And it's a fun time.
Yeah. And the other side of the coin is the medical advancements. You used to get shot in Milwaukee back in the 80s. You'd bleed out by the time they got you to the hospital. Paramedics, I used to tell the ambulance to stabilize you to death. It's like, let's go. I always told my partner, if I ever get shot, just get me in a car and get me out of here. The paramedics are going to kill me. But, it's gotten a lot better since then. We've got Flight for Life. We've got actual doctors and stuff like that. And I always call it the golden hour. They can get you to our major trauma center within an hour. Your chances of, and you're alive, after that hour, your chances of living probably go up to 60% easy, no matter how badly wounded you are, and the doctors are really good out there and stuff like that. So it's all improved.
So as a Milwaukee homicide detective, you started out as a detective there, but then later on you got promoted and then you were over that unit or part of that unit at some point, right? So how many years did you work there? Huh?
I worked in homicide. 30 on homicide?
Probably. Well, just in total.
32 total, at least the last 12 in homicide as a detective and as a lieutenant. And it was always, to me, the most interesting place to work, the homicide unit, because the city was willing to spend money on the homicide investigations. They were very interesting. And I don't know, there was just something about some of the cases, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but, a lot of the cops got burned out when you had two drug dealers pull up to a corner and just, shoot it out and, one's dead and nobody really gave, even the witnesses, the citizens were like, yeah, we know who he is. We're not going to call you and bother you. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. There's a dead body laying here, but, we got some of those, and some of the ones that are still unsolved in Milwaukee were, I think the worst one I ever had is I was in uniform. I took a missing call back in, I don't know, I think it was like the early 80s. And a young kid named Brad Machette, he came home from school and he normally called his grandmother. This is before cell phones. And he would walk 7 blocks to his grandma's bar, which it was more like a restaurant, and meet up where his mom worked. Well, he doesn't show up, and we found him sodomized and strangled in a cornfield about 30 miles north of Milwaukee. It's never been solved. And, that was the first introduction to my world of sex offenders. I cannot believe how many true sex offenders are out floating around in our country here. And it is just, to see a little kid in a casket like that, it is really an eye opener. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then we started having cops killed, and we started having older people that were out cutting their lawn, and they're murdered in the backyard during a burglary or something. And you started to realize that no matter where you were in the city, you're not safe at any time. I mean, people doing innocent things, it could just turn tragic in a minute's notice,
Yeah. Tulsa's kind of similar to that, where you just don't know where it's going to strike. It's not just in one specific area of town. It could happen anywhere.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So you get there, you're in that unit, and of course you're part of the Dahmer case. So tell me, let's jump into that and how that all came about and how you guys started getting onto that case.
I had just gotten transferred from drugs from our narcotics unit over to the CIB, the Criminal Investigation Bureau, and it was a third shift call. And it was such a weird deal, and people ask me to talk about it. A lot of the times we just had a young girl that was found murdered in Milwaukee, dismembered, right? And I got a call from Miss Banfield. I can't think of her first name right now.
Was that a black girl by chance?
Yes, it was.
I think I saw, yeah.
Yeah. And I got a call from Miss Banfield, and she said, let's talk about it. Do you got another serial killer? And I said, the weird thing is, like, when Dahmer was arrested, it was over with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, everything was right there. I mean, it really wasn't I hate to say this, it really wasn't one of these real detailed investigations where you've got bodies scattered all over the city and you're running around like we've had other serial killers with prostitutes and things like that over the years, where those aren't solved right away. And you get a lot of pressure from the news media, from certain groups of people. But with Dahmer, the criticisms really started to come in with the way that the Milwaukee Police Department handled the missings and things like that. And I'll be real honest with you. I'm not here to lie to you. When they came in to report some of these people missing, they did nothing. They took a missing report and said, Jason White's missing. It's like, okay, call us when he comes back. Honest to God, there wasn't a lot of work done on it. And I think part of the problem is some of these people, and again, I'm trying to word this carefully, were not, they weren't the working type people that had patterns like you and I might every day or somebody else. You know what I'm saying? They weren't going to school. They'd show up at some of these taverns and things like that. Dahmer was, he had a couple of run-ins with law enforcement, indecent exposure, and he did some fondling of another young man in Milwaukee. He was sent to jail, but he basically was let out after a few years. And by then he had honed his skills and had the bodies in the apartment in freezers and refrigerators and was, actually pretty good at what he did. He had some skills there. He was, I remember one of the things we did is we went and we talked to some of the people in the apartments. Okay. We knocked on some doors. We called a canvas and we said, hey, do you know the guy up in 213? And my partner was actually helping move the blue acid vat out of the apartment because he was a really big, strong guy. But I remember I knocked on a door and I said, hey, do you know the guy up in 213? And she said, oh, he's wonderful. He holds the door open for me. He helps carry up my laundry from the basement. And, he asked me if I need milk or anything, when he goes to the store. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going to shock you. And she was like, you're wrong. She said, you're wrong. He's a wonderful young man. And so it just kind of shows you how he had this chameleon-like effect, on the people. Nobody suspected really anything. There were a couple calls about the smell in the apartment and stuff like that. But, and again, everything was just sort of like dumped off, because there was, I don't know, there really was no reason to suspect anything at that point.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until there was a young man named Tracy Edwards that he picked up in July of 1991 and took home and put some handcuffs on him and said, I'm going to eat you and I'm going to kill you. And Tracy managed to escape out of the house and ran right down the street into a uniformed squad car, and they went back and arrested him. And that's when the whole thing began. And, it kind of showed me, and I hate to say this, but, we were not prepared for that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was all young cops on the third shift that were there. They didn't get a search warrant. Things just didn't turn out the way that I think that nowadays, if you had a major crime scene, we'd involve the DA's office and the medical examiner's office right away. But, people were rummaging through the apartment and it wasn't sealed. You laugh, And,
No, I remember you talking about that when you were speaking. I couldn't believe it.
It got even more bizarre, and it's embarrassing to me, but we had some newspaper reporters and some local news reporters on channel 6 and 4 here that they were really hot looking women. Okay. And they showed up at our police bars and they were giving out Packer tickets and food and other biological things to our cops. And all these cops were leaking stories to them, and it was like my roommate at the FBI Academy worked on the John Bonet case, and we were laying in bed together, not together. We were laying in our room one night. We started talking back and forth, and he said he couldn't believe, how the cops were like mesmerized by the whole thing. They thought they were, like heroes. They wanted to write books and all this type of stuff. Even in the Dahmer case, I'm going to try to explain this slowly, but we had two judges, Judge Frank Thomas Crivello, who was like a peacock. He's deceased now, but he would sit and he just was like this colorful, best dressing, he thought he was the best looking guy in America. And we had this Judge Graham. And the way it works in Milwaukee is they have a preliminary hearing. You get arrested. You're not indicted. I don't know how it works and, where you live there in Tulsa or anything, but you're charged. And then within 10 days, they have a hearing in front of a judge who at the time was Crivello, and it was the actual prelim. Normally they take like an hour. There's nothing to it. We present evidence and this thing went on for like an hour for a week because of we didn't even know who some of the victims were. I could tell you a million stories. We had no idea at first who some of these people were. But as it got to that, Crivello runs into Graham in the lunchroom, because the trial was going to get spun off to Graham, the actual trial. And they both had book deals. And I imagine that their judges had book deals. And Crivello tells Graham, hey, I think I'm going to keep the trial. It's like, what the hell do you mean you're keeping the trial? He says, it's my trial. He says, no, I'm the only one that I've gone through all the evidence, a week long, unheard of prelim. They got into a fist fight in the lunchroom over who was going to get it because they had book deals, right? And Graham wound up getting the case and he wrote a book. I mean, it was just, and then one of the reporters, one of our cops, for some privileges, some favors, took her through the crime scene, right? And she writes, and it, God, she puts in the paper when she writes it, I'm the only reporter that was actually in the Dahmer crime scene. It was like, oh my God. It just, it got so bad. We even had cops one cop ordered 75 pictures, the booking photos of Dahmer, and was having him autograph those, and they were selling them. I'm not kidding you. The stories were just, you didn't think that the people that you worked with could be, I don't know, that foolish.
And that's the stuff that people don't really know. And I appreciate you being candid about it, because you talked about it. Yeah. When you talked about it in San Antonio, I was like, I was floored. I couldn't believe it.
Look at this. They caught the newspaper reporters going through our garbage at the police department. They would grab our garbage and think that, because, it all goes somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And they actually caught, the newspaper reporters going through the garbage and stuff like that. So everything started to get shredded. They took it to different locations and burned it right away. But, there was such and I don't know what this is, Jason, but I always get calls from people. Is it a serial killer? Oh, is it a serial killer? Oh my God. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, no, I think it's just one guy here and a different guy here. Oh, I was hoping it would be a serial killer. I don't know. What's the difference? You know what I'm saying? It kind of drives me nuts, but there's that certain allure to that serial killer. And I just saw somebody, what a circus. I remember in the building when we were talking to people, and I came out of the building and there were so many news trucks on the street. I bumped into Lester Holt. I never met the guy. I walked out and there was Lester Holt. It was like a circus. And then our police chief made it real clear that he was going to be the star of the circus. You know what I'm saying? Guy named Phil Areola. And it wasn't, so he would get a briefing from us and he would go on television and he would say the wrong things. It was like, we just told him we don't, well, he would. So it was kind of like, what's he going to make up today? And it was just amazing, but I think whatever it is like, we've arrested famous people in Milwaukee, football players, and they get treated better. You know what I'm saying? They're and Dahmer, there was some concern from people about the way he was treated. He wasn't put into an orange jumpsuit right away. And that was because he wasn't. Here's what what happens. You get arrested in Milwaukee. It's a pretty simple process. We take you to the city jail because we're city cops. They book you. They put you in the city jail. We walk to the DA's office tomorrow morning, and they take you to the court, and you're charged and put in the county jail where they have an orange uniform. Well, we didn't get Dahmer over into he was in the county jail, and that's the sheriff's department behind him. And that's because he was in the county jail. So, there were certain groups, the NAACP, certain groups of people that thought he was being treated with this kid glove type thing. And, part of the thing is that, and a lot of people don't know this, he was interviewed by lots of people. And, the FBI came in, people from Miami came in, people from Germany came in where he was stationed in the military. All kinds of people came in and wanted to talk to him. And the FBI, when he was actually sentenced, they had made an offer to the city and the county that they wanted him. They wanted to study him. If he had any value to humanity, it was to study him. And they said no because of the negative attention. It would look just like they were giving him special attention by sticking him in a federal penitentiary where he would have more access to different programs. So the plan that I heard was that they keep him in jail for 5 years. They ship him over to the feds. They study him. But, unfortunately, he was killed in our state prison system. So that never happened. Yeah. But to show you how weird it was, the mom and dad fought over the body. They were divorced. Mom and dad hated the air each other breathed. They each got lawyers and wanted to keep the brain to see if they could sell it. I'm not kidding you. It never went away. It never went away where people thought they were going to make money off of this. And then Netflix comes out a couple months or about a year ago already now with that show, and it was fairly accurate. It was fairly accurate, but it amazes me that people are that interested in a case that, from 20, 30 some years ago already. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't even think a lot of people were born, but they read those cases. And the guy who killed Dahmer, his name was Scarver. He was already in jail for a murder. So he mentioned the fact, what are you going to do to me? Put me in jail? It was just one of those interviews. I remember the cops, and they said no, and they stuck him in a federal penitentiary someplace in Oklahoma. I think it's in Oklahoma. They buried him somewhere because he was just like Dahmer or some of these other prisoners, these high-risk prisoners. Look at Whitey Bulger. Look at these guys. That's your worst nightmare when you got those people like Paris Hilton locked up in your jail, and you got to keep them safe on top of everything else.
Right. Well, that guy from the Idaho killings. I mean, good luck.
Yeah. Good luck.
Good luck with that.
I was thinking, it's funny you mentioned it. I was thinking the same thing. Somebody's going to kill him. It's just a matter of time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Or he's going to kill himself. But I'm with you on that. I think that they're looking for an opportunity for him.
Oh,
for sure.
And it's the thing too, and you're a cop. I can't tell this to my friends who are accountants or they work at Milwaukee Electric Tool and produce this or that. But you go to talk to these people, and it's like murder is like you and I watching, a football game. It's like, yeah, I killed him. Big deal. He deserved to be killed. So what? And it's like nothing. And for the normal person, I mean, to understand these sick puppies that you and I go out and talk to, and then you go home and lay in bed, and it's just like I can't believe how bent America really is with a lot of these criminals that are out there, and how they were as successful, I guess, if that's the word, as they were killing people. Yeah,
that brings me to my next question because just from the outside looking in, Dahmer looked like a very personable kind of guy.
Yeah,
of course, when you've got a head and there's plenty of pictures online. We're not going to show the deep, dark ones, but there's plenty of pictures. You can see what he did to some of these people, and it's insane. But so you can't really deny when you got body parts in your freezer. So
Right.
when you're sitting there talking to Jeff, what was he like as far as just sitting across the table from him?
The two guys that talked to him finally the longest were a guy with the last name of Murphy and a guy who's now dead. But they were the ones that went in and talked religion and stuff to him a little bit. And we basically looked at the unidentified. One of the things we had was the unidentified people. We went out and worked with the medical examiner's office and stuff like that. But he was one of the things I remember the first night. His dad, Lionel Dahmer, called probably our best defense attorney in Milwaukee, a guy named Jerry Boyle at the time. Jerry Boyle was a very charismatic guy, and I liked Jerry a lot, and he just recently passed away. But Jerry went and got a big head after this. He was on all these talk shows, Sally, Jesse, Raphael, and Oprah and stuff. You laugh, but everybody was like making money off of this type of stuff. We had calls from people that wanted to buy a fork or a plate or the refrigerator out of. You laugh.
Oh, I know. I remember that fridge.
Oh,
and what did they end up doing with that?
I'll tell you about
it, right?
No, here's what happened. There was a guy in Chicago. I don't know who it was. They had that stuff stored in Milwaukee, and even here's what makes me feel bad. Even us guys that worked on the case didn't know where some of that stuff was stored because they thought we were going to go steal it. Really, and sell it. This is how ridiculous this was. But somebody in Chicago bought everything. They gave the city $750,000 for that, all that stuff. Okay. And it was written up. Each family got $50,000. That's why there was a $750,000. And then they destroyed it in a landfill, not to be known. And somebody went along, to watch and guarantee that everything was destroyed. So it isn't out there. I don't know what landfill, I don't know where it was, but that was the agreement. And so it all disappeared. But we got a call too. Somebody, we have never had this, open records. Somebody tried to buy hundreds of photos of Dahmer. And they put them in bubblegum packs, serial killers with Bundy and Gacy and all of. You laugh, but you could go down to the corner grocery store and buy serial killer collector cards. And these were guys that collected baseball cards and football cards, and now they wanted the original Jeffrey Dahmer cards and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, am I kidding you? It was just unbelievable. And one of the families called me a number of years after the homicides. Last name was like Bradenhoft. And their kid was actually found in the refrigerator, actually the freezer. There was a refrigerator and a freezer. But they were really upset, and I didn't know anything about this, but some guy in Milwaukee was offering Dahmer tours, just some citizen, right? And for $25, you got a bag lunch. They took you for a tour around the city. They showed you the bars, the massage parlors, where he lived at the building that was just getting torn down because Marquette bought that. I'll tell you about that in a second. But they couldn't believe that somebody was going to be making money and that people wanted to go and see this. They thought it was terrible, And so it was like, look, you really can't do anything about this. I mean, people drive by all the time, and that was one of the problems with the building I'll tell you about in a second. But on the day in question, when they were driving by where the building was, they were outside and they attacked the bus and cut the tires. So, it really had a lot of, I guess, emotion. It never goes away for some of those families. But here was another story. You got to understand, there was no social media back in the 80s. And Marquette University, which was just down the street, maybe 2 blocks south and maybe 10 blocks east, Marquette University was our gem in the city of Milwaukee. It is the gold standard for the city of Milwaukee. The buildings were beautiful and it was really nice. They noticed that there was a decrease in white females attending Marquette, a noticeable drop. And when they went out and talked to people, people said, well, it's because Jeffrey Dahmer was raping and killing white females. There was no further. That was the furthest thing from the truth I ever heard. But you know how rumors spread and everything like that. So the next thing I know, they noticed tons, and the people living up in the 900 block of North 25th Street where that apartment was, said it was nonstop. People getting pictures. They had contests, like they were holding Barbie dolls in front of the address and snapping them and putting them out on, I don't know where they were doing all this type of stuff, what they were going to do with it. But, it was just, people would get drunk and come and sit on the front lawns and stuff and want to be photographed. So Marquette University bought the building. You laugh. I can't believe this, but they bought the building and they were going to make it a green space, but they tore it down. It's still, I was there a couple months ago. Nothing's ever been developed. The building's gone, but they didn't want that eyesore / shrine set up anymore. So It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, but like I said, was he the time when you would speak with him, was he was pretty personable?
He was. I think that's why he was successful. One of the things he mentioned is he had a telephone in his house and nobody in 3 years had ever called him. He had a telephone and he never used. His whole family, and again, you look at it, he's one of these guys, he had no friends at all. He was working at a place called Ambrosia Chocolate, which was downtown. He was like some mixer. I don't know. They take the shells and they make chocolate, and no friends. His big hobby was on the way home from work, he took a bike to work back and forth, and he'd pick up dead animals and take them home and cut them up. And that was his big claim, that he liked to go and see what made things work. And so you can see how it kind of carried over into humans later on, But I went to the FBI Academy and they talked to me a little bit when I was there, a lot of their profilers, and they mentioned things like, that there were people that came up with the fatal triage, fire setting, bedwetting, and cruelty to animals. And if you had all three, you had a serial killer. Well, I don't think that's really true. You know what I'm saying? I never heard anything about Dahmer being a bedwetter. Cruelty to animals, I guess you could call it that. And fires, I don't know. Allegedly, he may have been involved in a couple of fires, I remember him talking, and if he did it, and like you said, you know what this is like. You get into an interrogation room with a guy, and if you got a gun on him, what's he gonna say? The only other defense I can think of is, "Hey, Jason, you planted that gun on me." That's it. What's he gonna say? It's not my gun. I found it. I was really trying to turn it into the police department. Yeah, okay. But Dahmer, everything was right there. So what's a sense of trying to, I got to tell you the story in a second. What's the sense of trying to deny it? So the family hires Jerry Boyle, and Boyle came into the room at one point, and Dahmer said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Jerry Boyle. Your dad hired me. Stop talking." And he said, "These are my friends. You get out of here. I want to keep talking to my friends." And Boyle couldn't believe it. Boyle couldn't believe it. And like I said, he was just a different kind of guy, and everybody wanted to talk to him. And it kind of got, like I said, Germany came in, Miami came in, Chicago came in. The number I believe that they finally came up with was 17. One in Bath Township, Ohio. That was the first one. And then 16 up here. But they didn't charge him with one up here. I'll get the kid's name wrong. It was like Stephen Toomey or something like that. White male. Dahmer killed him in the Ambassador Hotel, but he said, when I woke up, he was dead. I don't remember killing him. And that was, that was the only one that they decided not to kill, or not to charge him. And really, what's the difference? You got him with 14, 15 here, one. He's never going to get out. And they gave him some sentence of 941 years. This was just, everything was so overblown. But it was just like a circus from day one. And people thought they were going to make money. People were going to go write books. People were going to go on talk shows. And the families, I think, were the ones that I really felt sorry for, because they were dragged through this circus every day. And people had T-shirts, that they printed. Some guy opened up the Deli Dahmer down the street, and had like wieners and, body. You laugh, but it was like, oh my God, and it was just endless. T-shirts were on the corners for a while that people were selling, I remember one of them was a Thanksgiving dinner, and it says, "You're not going to tell me how many people I can have for Thanksgiving," with a picture of Jeff, and people just came up with all this sarcastic humor, and and for us, I think the police department, we were embarrassed. The worst part about it was the story of Conorak, that they gave back Conorak Synthesem phone to Dahmer, who was 14, and Dahmer killed Conorak later on that night. And one of the things when I talk to people and like you guys, part of that problem was the culture in Milwaukee where all the young guys got dumped on the third shift. There was nobody with any experience. You had all these young guys, guys with 2 years on the job or teaching guys with 1 year on the job. And almost that whole year they were in the academy. And so they had never encountered somebody like Dahmer, who was probably one of the best bullshitters that you could ever. I mean, you think about it. You grabbed Conorak, you took him home, you were going to sodomize him, you drilled holes in the head, he's bleeding, Dahmer goes to get more beer. He's out of beer. And he walks because he doesn't drive, he walks to the 7-Eleven, comes back, and somebody called the cops because Conorak is walking down the street bleeding. And the bad thing was Conorak couldn't communicate because Jeff had drilled into his head and dumped some acid in there. And Dahmer walks up to the cops. I'd be running the other way and says, "Hey, this is my lover. We had a fight. I'm sorry." And it was kind of like, "Yeah, okay." And it was a really busy night. And I'll tell you about that in a second. And they gave Conorak back to Dahmer, who said later at the Fire and Police Commission, because they fired those two cops, that I killed him within 3 hours after that. And one of the things that really bothered me was Areola looked at the assignment sheet for those two officers, Gabrish and Balzerzak, the night they gave Conorak back to Dahmer. And they were a midnight to 8 a.m. car, and they had handled 18 assignments that night. Right at, this is Milwaukee. It was warm. I think it was May. And one after another, they're handling these assignments. And Areola says, here's just a reason I should fire him. Nobody could handle 18 assignments in a night and do a good job. Well, that was the dispatchers sending us to everything. That wasn't the cops' fault. Every time you went back in the service, they sent you someplace else. It was that busy. And so what are you going to do? Refuse to take an assignment? So get this. They fire Gabrish and Balzerzak, right? The union comes out and they charge Gabrish and Balzerzak with a simple failure to failure to conduct a proper investigation, and fired them, right? Just out and out fired them. And you can argue if you thought that was fair. I'm not going to get into it. But the union came to us and said, from now on in, you get sent to a car, anything, a burglary, a stolen car. You stay there until you think it's done. So we had guys that were going to a burglary for like 6 or 7 hours. You laugh, a simple home burglary. And the dispatchers were banging them, and they were sending sergeants to the scene and saying, "What are you doing here, Jason? You've been here 6 hours." It's like, "Sarge, are you telling me not to conduct a proper investigation? Because just sign my memo book. You don't want me to do that, and I'll leave and go take another assignment," And it got really ugly. And after a while, everything kind of died down. But, the people, when they heard some of this type of stuff, I don't know. It was bad. That's all I can tell you. Morale suffered. You're an officer, Jason. It was bad when they gave Conorak back to Dahmer. But I don't know what to tell you. I don't know.
Well, I could see how that could have happened.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I don't know. So that case, it's still talked about.
I mean, everybody's interested.
Absolutely.
I think because there was necrophilia and cannibalism and that stuff all in one.
Yeah. Has there been somebody else like him ever?
Yeah.
He's unique, right?
The thing the feds said, that he was the only guy that they had ever met he talked to everybody. You know what I'm saying? The feds came in and they couldn't shut him up either. He just kept on talking, and that's why everybody wanted to interview him. They wanted forensic people, forensic psychologists to come in and all kinds of people, students. And maybe that was the plan. It just didn't work out right. Yeah. You know what I'm saying for him? And I don't know. I think that anytime you and I read about any murder, we can learn something from it.
Absolutely.
But and when I go out and I speak to people, sometimes I get razzed from cops really bad. It's like, what the hell? How can you justify giving Conorak back? And it's like, I'm not justifying it, but you got to understand the culture, the young guys. And that's why I preach to guys like you and other guys. We got to talk to these younger cops and work with them. We can't just stick them from the academy on the third shift and say, here's a gun and a badge and go out and do the best you can, because there's people out there that'll either kill them or bullshit them to death. That's just the way that it is.
Good point. Let's segue into cold justice, which I'll tell you something, Steve. If there was a show out there to be a part of, that's the show that I absolutely.
It is.
It's fascinating. I love the show. It's a project that I think is really something special. And you guys have been able to give hope to countless families in this country. And there's been a lot of success with that. I just happened to watch a show, believe it or not. I was watching, I just threw a Dateline episode on, and it was that case up in Minot, North Dakota.
Yeah.
And I was floored. I was floored when they came back with a not guilty.
I tell you, that was they called me right away, and that family was devastated. And this as well as I do. Anybody who's listening or going to watch this, murders are the simplest formula from A to B. You know what I'm saying? A wife goes missing. Let's look at the husband. You know what I'm saying? In that case, you had two roommates that didn't get along, two women. One was accused of killing the other one's fish. They were going to move. I'm not kidding. You know how every murder I've ever had is just, it's over stupid stuff. I had a guy cut in front of a guy at McDonald's, and that's a felony in Milwaukee if you cut in front of somebody at McDonald's, because they pull out a gun and they blow you away. I was telling my partner that, and but she admitted to her relative. Her story was she never went home. The suspect never went home that night. But then she's talking to her aunt, and she said, "Yeah, I left the bar and I went home, and then I went to my dad's house and slept." And the aunt even was like, "Oh my God," And she was the one who testified at the trial, who had no reason to lie about the whole thing, because that murder, it was staged. The screen was cut, and she couldn't have gotten in or out of it. The door was locked. I mean, what criminal is going to lock a door on the way out except somebody? Yeah, and there were just things, and I get it. But one of the things that people don't understand is the importance of circumstantial evidence. You know what I'm saying? And they always tell me that. It's like, well, but big deal. So he's having an affair on his wife, and big deal. So he told his buddy, "I wish my wife would die so I could move on." It's once you start adding all that up, and Kelly does a good job of explaining it. But part of the problem is, even with that case in Minot, the people kept saying, "Well, where was the evidence?" I mean, my answer was, it was right in front of you here. They have this history of not getting along, and weird things, like when the girl, I can't think of her name right now, doesn't show up at work because she's dead. Her mother calls the roommate looking for her and says, "Hey, do you know where she is?" And it's like, why would you call me? I'm working. And she basically hung the phone up on. Now, this is your roommate, your best friend that and it, I don't know. It just was everything that lined up right. But when it was explained to the jury, I don't think they got it. And,
no, but I did notice the same argument that the defense team was trying to do. Oh, it's a rush to judgment. Yeah. It's this and that. We get the same thing.
Yeah, it's always a template. Every case I go on, it's like, I don't care what state I'm in. Right away, Detective White got to the scene and he focused in on my client with the exclusion of all the other. That's because your client was guilty right away. You could, everybody else cooperated. Your client wouldn't even talk to us. Wouldn't give his phone, wouldn't give DNA. Gee, I wonder, why the cops started to suspect him right away. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and I've had some of these dumb guys that they'll kill their wife, and a week later they move their girlfriend into the house. You know what I'm saying? And, and they won't know she ran away. It's like, you got to be kidding me here. You know?
And you said something on, all right, so cold justice, I love it. And I got to tell you, man, anytime we've ever had a new detective come into our unit, I tell them, I said, listen, your homework assignment is to watch Cold Justice a lot, because that's how you really kind of should introduce yourself to these cold cases. Re-interview people. Relationships change.
Right. It's the same thing for detectives that I tell them. It's not the same thing as when you initially get sent. You know what I'm saying? You get there and everything is in play. But these cold cases, you hope things have changed later on. You know what I'm saying? But even in Milwaukee, I remember we had like clerks at 7-Elevens murdered. We had nothing, for years, nothing. And the DNA, people always ask me this, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but you go into a 7-Eleven, how much DNA do you think you're going to have on the counter alone at a 7-Eleven? Endless on the doors. So it's useless. But I remember one night I was working, and one of the guys, a uniform cop, called me and said, "Hey, come on over to District 5, which is on the north side. You might want to talk to this woman." And this woman is all beaten up. And I said, "Are you okay? I thought I was there to handle like a serious domestic violence." And she said, "No, I know something you want to know." And I said, what's that? And she said, my boyfriend's the one who robbed that bank on First and Capitol and killed a police officer, which was open. I almost fell off of my chair. We had no clue who it was until she walked in, and it was actually a 7-Eleven. And we had no clue because the cops made a traffic stop later on and got killed by this guy. And we had nothing. And, that relationship changed once she got the bejesus beaten out of her by her boyfriend. That's how these things start to fall to, there. But the big problem I have, you handle a case in 2004, retire in 2009, and now I'm supposed to pick up your case in 2025 and read it. And, you're the guy that has all of this institutional knowledge, stupid stuff like, did the guy smoke? Did he have a white dog? You went over to the house and noticed that, he was a gun collector. That's not all in your reports. You know what I'm saying? And you lose that. And I don't know. It's awfully tough in some cases to put some of that stuff together. And it is interesting. We get people all the time that ask us like, well, how come you didn't interview this? We do, but the show is only an hour. You know what I'm saying? That's part of the problem we've got.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. So you've been able to, you became a part of it in 2014. Right. I think I saw a little, if you go to YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, you can see a bunch of fun videos between him and Kelly. I mean, obviously you guys are a dynamic duo. She's fun.
She's the lawyer, and sometimes, you're a cop. Jason, you can smile, but sometimes the Constitution can get bent a little bit. You know what I'm saying? You don't break it and bend it. Kelly's like, I can't believe we even thought of that. I said, well, I did, and it's not with me, you're not. And it's just funny sometimes, once in a while, the stuff that goes on back and forth.
Yeah. But one of the things that you'd mentioned something about how she describes circumstantial evidence, and I saw something on one of the deals where she has like one pencil and breaks it. But then you put a whole bunch of pencils together and try to break it.
Well, if you got this, bang, it breaks, and she goes. That's right. I can't believe it, But then she grabs, the whole stack and says, well, you can't break it, and it's really a good demonstration. You know as well as I do that most, I think, juries are. They want to be entertained, by the defense attorney who's running around and showing stabbing, and it is it's a theatrical performance sometimes, those closing arguments, and it is, and people are, you get up there with that monotone. Well, I think I've proven to you that, Jason White, and they're falling asleep and stuff like that, and it is an interesting.
It's a performance. It really it's like an acting. If those that are exceptionally good communicators are usually really successful in court, and you still see sometimes you still see prosecutors, and I give them a little bit of credit if they're at least willing to try. But my gosh, there's some defense attorneys that have caused their clients to become guilty.
I had a defense attorney throw a statute book at me one time. I think he was trying to make a point. You know what I'm saying? But it had something to do with, we found a witness months after the murder, and his argument was, well, why would you believe a guy who calls you 8 months later? Shouldn't he have called you the first night? In a perfect world, you'd have that, but it doesn't work that way. So he took the statute book and he said, well, you just trashed the statute book, and I think he was going to throw it on the floor, and it went over my head. Just missed me. And he was even kind of shocked by that. And they find the guy guilty. And I shouldn't tell you this, but the judge lets us talk to the jury. Once in a while, people, they talk. And I said, why'd you find him guilty? And she said, well, because he almost hit you with the statute book. It was like, and it was like, yeah, but what about the fact that we had witnessed? Yeah, that too. But man, it just shocked me when he threw the statute book, So I don't know what people pick up during a trial. They've made weird comments to me like, hey, where do you think the defense attorney gets those neckties from? It's like, I don't know, just bizarre stuff that comes out of some of these jurors' mouths, but they pick up on different things during those week-long trials.
Yeah, and I hate to say this, but because there's some jurors that are exceptional. I've ran across a few of my jurors over the years that were on some of my murders, but they always say that they weren't smart enough to get out of jury duty. That's why they were there. Yeah. So, but anyway, it's so you're there. You become a part of this. Kelly didn't know you at the time, but then she got to know and she speaks incredibly highly of you. You're of another breed.
Yeah, we get along good. That way we get along good, but it's like, I'm sure you've had people that are watching this. I don't think they'll understand this, but I had partners in the car with me where we're like, you're not arresting the guy. So yes, we are, well, I don't know, and you go back and forth because this whole idea of probable cause, you're never going to find a great definition, and it's going to be different to everybody else. And it just brings out sometimes the juices, that emotion, everything's flowing in you. And I do understand sometimes that we make arrests too early or we don't have enough, but I don't know. It's some of the cases that you see, they're enough to haunt you for the rest of your life. Yeah,
and some of them actually are never going to get any better. And sometimes it's worth a shot, and you might be surprised. And so you guys start doing this, you become a part of this, you start going all over the place. This is a lot. I'm going to guess that most of your departments that reach out to you are going to be more your smaller variety that don't have a lot of volume. Right. What is kind of the one thing that you've noticed, kind of a common theme with these departments? Is it just a lack of experience in working these murders?
Yeah, that's part of it. Kelly assigns me to all these missing women. A lot of them we don't do the shows on because we've got nothing. But I wound up with the missing wives. I've read so many cases I could tell you stories about. It's unbelievable, And like I said, there's no woman that's just going to leave without her car, her glasses, her medication, no money, not pick up her last paycheck and leave her newborn baby behind and never call back, And you start putting these things together. And some of the DAs are willing to put that in front of a jury. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, you're right. What about this? What about this? But there's other ones that are like, well, and the problem is, you might have noticed this when you put out like a reward. Hey, we're looking for, Mary Jones, and people, I was in Florida last week at the gas station pumping, and she pulled up next to me in a black SUV. Well, that didn't happen, but we got to go out and investigate it, and it can really drag those cases down in the wrong direction. But if you've got females watching, I always tell them this: if you've got a history of domestic violence with your spouse or significant other, get the hell out now. Don't look back. Get out, because it never goes away. Leopards don't change their spots, and there's always that behind. And it's the same thing with OJ. People say, well, so what? He beat her up once in a while, but he loved it. Well, there's that history. You don't understand it. It's a way of thinking. And I don't know. It's hard for me sometimes to understand why we can't go forward with more of these cases.
Yeah, I love it. I hope that show doesn't disappear. I know that she's got another project that's like Prosecuting Evil is the name of the show.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, if you ever are looking for an extra hand anywhere in this country, you give me a call, buddy, and I would be there in a heartbeat.
If anybody's got cold cases. Here's the problem. We get calls from the families, but we need the police departments to work with because they've got the reports and everything, and a lot of them, I think they're afraid that they're going to be embarrassed. Let me tell you, I just told you the story about Dahmer. We screwed up royally. You know what I'm saying? Every case I've ever worked on, somebody always says, hey, did you guys think about doing this? It's like, damn, we forgot it. You know what I'm saying? Go back during the daylight or something. It's what it is, and, it's like you go to a doctor and you have a stomach ache, they give you Pepto-Bismol. Next week, you're vomiting blood and you got cancer, and it's like, why the hell didn't you run it? Well, because, it is what it is here, and the Manson case. I mean, that was,
that case was a train wreck. You talk about one of the worst investigations ever.
Oh,
I hate to say that because that's a fascinating case. I love talking about it. So throw his email up there, Amanda. I want people to see his email. He's willing to share that with you. If you happen to have, when I met you, Steve, you handed me a giant stack of business cards from Cold Justice and said, hey, hand these out to people if they have cases.
We go to CrimeCon and stuff, and it's really sad. If you go to CrimeCon, they allow family members into what they call press row. Here's what it is. There's lines of people. They don't charge them. It's usually mothers that as you're walking through, they're handing out pieces of paper with their missing daughter or missing grandkids on. I'm not kidding you. It's heartbreaking to get all these pieces of paper where, and you look at some of the cases and they went to work and all of a sudden they find their car abandoned on the St. James, Parkway in Vermont or in Virginia, and there's no body. There's nothing. They didn't run away. Something happened here, and what it was, I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. There are some guys, and I'm probably going to have them on here down the line. These guys literally will go back and look at some of these missing person cases, and they'll just look at the road and see if there's a body of water where they could have driven off into. And they've been successful at finding a lot of bodies. My gosh, it's crazy.
When I was at the FBI Academy, they handed me a bunch of them all over the country, and there were a lot of these guys that were impersonating cops. And my reason for believing that is the windows were rolled down about, this much. They found the cars abandoned, no bodies, but we had all kinds of reports everywhere. And I haven't seen many lately. But, you go on eBay right now and buy a police badge and a red light, and out you go and you can play Dick Tracy and pull people over, especially women in secluded areas,
True. So, Amanda, throw up some of his books. He's written some books.
I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. Yeah.
No, I know, but I'm going to give you credit for taking the time to do that, and I know that that's not what you're about. So what is that? What is the Spingola files?
So I was at one of my classes at UW Milwaukee, and one of the students said, "Hey, can you write a bunch of things?" I work with an anthropology class, and I went to criminal justice classes, so I just put in short cases in here that were really unusual. One of them, the same guy that got killed with Dahmer, he winds up getting killed in the same cell block as Jeffrey Dahmer by Scarver. And what he did is he basically murdered his wife. He's a white male, and he claimed that a black male did it, okay? And he throws down a baseball cap and says, "I hit the guy in the face," and he dropped his baseball cap. And the whole thing didn't make any sense. Why the wife was stabbed 27 times and he was stabbed once. We ran the cap, and sure enough, there was Negroid DNA in the, it was hair and stuff in it. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Nobody saw anything. All of a sudden, I get a call from a kid who says, "Hey, I think that's my baseball cap on the news." And I was like, "You're kidding me." No. So we went and talked to him. He says, "Yeah, I was walking through a shopping center about a month ago, and this funny looking white guy comes up and says, 'Hey, where'd you get that cap?' And he says, 'Over here at the sports shop.' He says, 'I'll give you $75 for it.' He says, 'You can go buy it for $35. He says, 'I'll give you $100 for it. Here you go.' It was his DNA. It was his baseball cap, And, and he planted, but every once in a while, these guys come up with some really interesting things. And I think sometimes it can throw the whole case off if you don't look at everybody being involved as some kind of dirty, you know what I'm saying? I mean, are they having affairs? I just saw today some woman killed her whole family, and I saw she was about to be indicted for taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from her employer. So there's always a story behind the story.
Yeah, interesting. So he's got a couple of other books too that you can find. You can find these on Amazon, and I'm sure that each one of them is I bet they're fascinating reads, and I'm definitely going to look at that one. I'm definitely going to check out that first one because that sounds like a
hell. I'll send it. It's that we got a problem up with our in upper like La Crosse, Wisconsin stuff, which is about a 3-hour drive from where I am. We have a bunch of guys that are found partially nude in our streams and rivers up there, the Mississippi River. And they've got a couple of detectives that showed up from New York trying to write a book, claim it's the Happy Face Killer, that it's a woman inviting guys down to the river because their pants are pulled on, you can figure out what's going on, and it pushes them into the river. Well, these guys, their blood alcohol content, very rarely is it under 2. Sometimes it's over 0.3. These guys are all drunk, and I think what they're trying to do is cut across the ice. But, those cases sometimes too, and I don't know if you've ever gotten this, people say it's not fair to make money. You're running this show and looking at my dead relatives and stuff like that, so I don't know. People have various reasons for not wanting cases looked at.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Kelly wasn't, she was like, yeah, in your department, she wasn't happy with our department. And I'm the peasant. It's not up to me. You know what I mean? I think that in most parts, I think it's the administration. It's above that level.
It's up there, and I don't know. I always tell sheriffs or cops, where do you get any credit for having an unsolved case from 15 years ago? Where even if you come in and work it and we don't solve it, you at least can go to the public and say, look, we picked that case back up and went out and looked at it again, just to see if things have changed. And sometimes that, I don't want to say pacifies, but the people that are still alive, what happened to Uncle Lenny back in 2004? Hey, look, we're looking at it again, and that's kind of decent, and
it doesn't hurt to re-interview and to just kind of look into it. And I think that we really need to tap in today. I think that we really need to tap into the social media end of it to at least put these cases out there, because it's like doing a canvas to 25,000 people.
It is.
And people, that's how people get their news nowadays anyway.
No,
so
that's a good point. I just went to a class for you. They were talking how like we put up a missing poster and there's a picture, the pictures do no good. One of the things on social media, you get a video of them like, walking around and it just, I guess it stirs more memories of somebody that might have seen just a picture. Yeah, me too.
I hadn't thought of that. I love that.
Yeah.
There's a cold case site that I've had her on here, the one that came up with it. It's the Iowa cold case site, which I really wish we could. I want to steal that idea and I want to put it out there, because she does a really good job with that.
Yeah.
Listen, Steve, I cannot thank you enough.
Anytime.
You've just been a ton of fun, ladies and gentlemen. If you're looking for a speaker for, the Dahmer case probably would be more geared towards law enforcement across this country, but Steve does speak. If you're looking for that, and I've seen him speak, he's exceptional. So you're not gonna be disappointed, no doubt. And check out Cold Justice. I'm telling you, I hope that show doesn't go anywhere. I really do hope that they continue to do it. So that's going to rely upon you, the public, watching. You got to watch the show. And if the ratings are high enough, then they'll keep shows like that out there, because they do a lot of good. And if you're a smaller department that has a case it could be any department really for that matter, they pay for all of the DNA testing, and that's extraordinarily expensive. And so that's
the best labs in the country.
That's right.
The best labs in the country.
The best labs, the best detectives. They're not taking over the case from you. They're going to help you work the case.
And they show it back. They drop off the case, or actually the video, of the show if they want anything in or out of that before it goes on television. So
yeah, I love it, man. I could talk to you for hours, but I've got a grandkid here that I'm going to get in trouble. So I got. Hey, man, I love it. You're a friend of mine from here on. If there's ever anything I can do for you on this end, then don't hesitate to reach out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything else that you want to? He didn't know this was going to be live. He was kind of like, "This is live," and I was like,
I was shocked.
"Oh yeah," and you did great. Yeah, we just roll with it, and whatever happens, buddy. We gotta. I would love to have worked with you, man. You would have been one of those. I think we would have had a lot of fun. Honestly,
I'll tell you, to look back at this career, you and I used to sit down and have a beer and just laugh at some of the stuff that you went and saw. Nobody could understand this type of stuff.
That's right.
Oh my God,
And we will one day. I have this feeling that one day our paths will cross and we will have a beer or two, and that'd be a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, next week. I've got a toss up between two different guests, so I can't tell you one or the other because I don't want to say who it is because I don't know. But it's going to be one of two, and it's going to be an exceptional guest. And I just know that's going to happen. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be just dynamite, and I appreciate it. Remember that I have that merch. The merchandise has dropped. If you want to get a coffee cup or something like that, it goes to a good cause. And check them out. I think that's cool. Remember to like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. I gave a tour to 4 people from, I'm trying to think of where it was at in Kansas. It was I don't want to get this town name wrong. I want to mention this, Newton, Kansas. They stopped by and they're super fans of your show too, Cold Justice, but they're also super fans of the First 48. They stopped by and, listen, we cannot do, I told them, I said, you need to check out my YouTube page. I don't get paid for this, but I like bringing guests on like him to it allows me an opportunity to call these people and go, if I just called Steve out of the clear blue and said, "Hey Steve, I just want to talk to you for an hour," he's going to go, "What's up with this guy? What a weirdo." But this makes it normal. So this is cool. And so hopefully
any cop can call any cop in America and talk for an hour. It's just what it is, It's a great job, And if you're considering it and you're out there, do it. Just do it.
Yeah, right on. I love it. So remember, like and subscribe. Thank you, Steve. Once again, buy his book. If you have a case that you have questions, I've noticed that he will respond to you on that email.
We look at them, some are difficult. I send them to other people to look at too. So what have you got to lose, That's
right. Hang on and don't click off and stick around. And Amanda, take us out.